HR fired me the day before my retirement party, so I brought a box they didn't expect. They thought I would cry. Instead, I sat perfectly still across from Karen Holt's polished desk and watched her thin lips curl into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You're being terminated, effective immediately," she said, sliding a single sheet of paper toward me like it meant nothing at all. My hands didn't shake when I picked it up, though my heart hammered so hard I could hear it in my ears. The words blurred together: policy violation, gross negligence, immediate dismissal, but none of it made sense. 35 years of perfect service, and now this. Tomorrow was supposed to be my retirement party. The cake was already ordered with my name spelled out in blue icing. The invitations had been sent weeks ago. My son had even flown in from Seattle to surprise me. I looked up at Karen, searching for some hint of humanity in those cold gray eyes, and found nothing but pure satisfaction gleaming back at me. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't some terrible misunderstanding that could be cleared up with a phone call. This was planned. Every single detail of my destruction had been carefully orchestrated. 2 weeks earlier, everything had been completely different. The office hummed with excited energy as people whispered about my upcoming retirement celebration in the break room and by the water coolers. Co-workers stopped by my desk throughout the day with stories about their favorite memories of working together over the years. Angela from shipping brought me a box of cigars because she remembered I enjoyed them on special occasions. Tom from logistics actually had tears in his eyes when he shook my hand goodbye during our last joint meeting about the Henderson account. There was even a secret group chat planning surprises for the party. I only knew because someone accidentally added me for about 30 seconds before quickly removing me with an embarrassed apology. My heart swelled with such gratitude I thought it might burst. After decades of early mornings that started before dawn and late nights that stretched past dinner, I finally felt truly appreciated and seen. Then the memo arrived in everyone's email inbox on a Tuesday afternoon. It was brief and cold, discussing staff restructuring and modernizing workplace efficiency with corporate buzzwords that made my stomach turn. Something in my gut twisted painfully when I read it, and Karen's eyes stayed locked directly on me during the entire staff meeting that followed. I remembered the day Karen Holt first walked through our glass doors like it was yesterday. She had seemed pleasant enough at first, young, sharply dressed in an expensive black suit, armed with an MBA from some prestigious university and a confident handshake that lasted just a beat too long. She smiled at everyone during those first few weeks and talked constantly about collaboration and fresh perspectives and bringing the company into the modern era. But that version of Karen disappeared within just a few short weeks. Soon came the cutting comments about outdated methods and people who couldn't adapt to new systems and technologies. She never said my name directly, but her eyes always found mine during those speeches, holding my gaze just long enough to make her point crystal clear. I told myself over and over it was nothing personal, just generational differences. I believed that professionalism and consistent excellence would bridge any gap between us. I was so incredibly wrong about that. The breaking point came during a quarterly review meeting when she casually mentioned in front of the entire management team that some employees don't recognize when their time has passed and they become a burden. I heard her laughing about it later in the break room with another manager, their voices carrying through the thin walls. My record was absolutely spotless. Not one written warning in 35 years of dedicated service. I had handled multi-million-dollar logistics contracts without a single error or complaint. I had personally trained half the current staff when they were nervous new hires. My efficiency ratings had always been excellent, often the highest in my department. So when small discrepancies started appearing in my personnel file, I was genuinely confused and concerned. A missing form here that I knew I'd submitted. A late time entry there that I clearly remembered logging. Things I knew with absolute certainty I had completed correctly suddenly showed gaps in the digital system. I questioned each discrepancy, bringing printouts and timestamps to Karen's office, but she dismissed my concerns with practiced patience that felt more like condescension. She suggested maybe my memory wasn't what it used to be, that perhaps I was more stressed than I realized. The comment stung deep, but I let it go and tried to be more careful. Then last week, while reviewing old digital records for a routine client audit, I found something that made my blood run absolutely cold in my veins. My own signature appeared clear as day on a document I had never seen before in my entire life. The humiliation came in small, calculated doses at first. Karen stopped inviting me to planning meetings I had always attended for over a decade. She assigned me basic filing tasks that junior assistants fresh out of college usually handled on their first week. During important team presentations in the conference room, she interrupted me mid-sentence to correct minor points that didn't actually need correcting at all. I watched helplessly as my coworkers began avoiding my desk like I carried some contagious disease. They stopped making eye contact in the hallways, suddenly finding their phones fascinating when I approached. Nobody asked me to lunch anymore, and the group chat that used to ping constantly went completely silent. I felt myself shrinking day by day, becoming invisible in a building where I had once been essential and respected. The worst moment came on a Tuesday morning when I accidentally opened an email Karen had forwarded to the operations manager. She tried to recall it immediately, but I'd already seen enough. The subject line was still visible before my screen refreshed. The last dinosaur in the building finally extinct soon. Good riddance to dead weight. If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a moment to like this story and also hit the subscribe button to get notified of our new series. Eddie saved me, or at least tried his absolute best to. He worked in accounting on the third floor and had been my close friend for over 20 years, since his very first day. He pulled me aside after a staff meeting, his weathered face tight with genuine worry and fear. "Man, something's very wrong," he whispered urgently, glancing around nervously to make sure we were completely alone. He explained in hushed tones that Karen had been systematically building a case against me for months, manufacturing small violations to create a convincing pattern of decline. The goal wasn't just to push me out early, it was to terminate me before my full pension benefits officially vested next month. The company could save thousands upon thousands of dollars by cutting me loose just a few weeks early. My stomach dropped like I'd been punched. "How do you know all this?" I asked, my voice shaking. Eddie's hands trembled slightly as he gripped my arm tightly, his eyes darting to the hallway. "Karen already filed your termination paperwork last Friday. It's dated for next week. They're going to blindside you." That night, I returned to the office long after everyone had left for the day. The building felt hollow and eerie without the usual hum of voices and computer fans and ringing phones. I used my access card, still active for now, to enter the archive room on the basement level where old records were stored in endless rows of metal shelves. For hours, I worked by the dim overhead lights that flickered occasionally, cross-referencing safety logs, payroll audits, and expense reports with my laptop balanced on a dusty box. My eyes burned from reading tiny print and staring at spreadsheets. Then I found them, discrepancies tied directly to Karen's department budget. Money redirected to training programs that never actually happened according to the scheduling system. Bonuses approved for consultants who didn't exist in any vendor database I could access. The amounts were small enough to avoid immediate detection by casual audits but large enough to add up to serious, prosecutable fraud. My hands shook violently as I photographed each page with my phone, the camera shutter clicking softly in the silence. I saved everything to a flash drive and tucked it deep into the inside pocket of my jacket, my heart racing. 2 days later, Karen called me into her office without any warning or explanation. She sat behind her massive desk with a manila folder open in front of her, her expression artificially grave and concerned. "We have a serious problem that's come to light," she said, her voice dripping with false concern that made my skin crawl. A random audit had allegedly revealed a missing shipping receipt from one of my major accounts, a critical document supposedly worth thousands of dollars. She showed me the file with a flourish. The numbers had been altered. I knew it immediately, instinctively, because I always triple-checked those specific records before closing them out. But arguing felt completely pointless now. Karen had already made her decision weeks ago. She leaned back in her expensive leather chair, arms crossed over her chest, satisfaction flickering dangerously in her cold eyes like a predator watching wounded prey. Guess you'll be retiring sooner than expected. Much sooner than you planned, actually. The next morning, I arrived at my desk to find my office door locked with a new electronic keypad I didn't recognize. 2 security guards appeared within minutes, polite but firm and clearly uncomfortable. "Sir, we need you to come with us right now," one said quietly, avoiding my eyes. The walk through the building felt endless, like some nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Every single head turned to stare. Whispers followed me like a dark shadow. Karen stood in her glass office on the second floor, watching with a hand pressed dramatically over her heart, performing grief for an audience of confused employees. Employees I had personally mentored for years looked away when I passed their desks. "What did he do?" someone whispered behind me, not quietly enough. The guard escorted me all the way to the lobby and handed me a termination letter in a sealed envelope. My badge was taken from my neck. My access was immediately revoked in the system. I turned back one last time toward the building I'd given my life to and made a silent promise: I would return. Soon. At home that night, surrounded by cardboard boxes full of memories, I felt the crushing weight of everything crash down on me all at once. Awards and plaques lined one entire wall of my small office. Commendations from grateful clients filled an entire drawer. Thank you cards from coworkers I had helped over the years were stacked in neat piles, bound with rubber bands. I had given this company everything: my time, my energy, my loyalty, my best years. And they had discarded me like I meant absolutely nothing, like I was garbage to be removed. I sat on the floor, staring at the boxes, feeling completely hollow inside. Then I saw my jacket on the kitchen counter. The flash drive. I had almost forgotten about it in my grief. With trembling hands, I pulled out my old laptop and plugged the drive in. Files opened across the screen. Emails, spreadsheets, scanned documents, financial records. One click later, I realized I was holding evidence that could completely destroy the entire HR department and everyone involved. The emails were absolutely damning. Conversations between Karen and upper management about cutting costs by systematically targeting senior employees nearing pension eligibility. Falsified documents created specifically to justify terminations that had no real basis. Direct orders to expedite exits quietly without drawing attention. There were at least 6 other employees who had been pushed out under eerily similar circumstances over the past 2 years. It wasn't just unethical, it was blatantly illegal. My hands shook as I scrolled through page after page of evidence. Then I found the one that made my vision blur with pure rage. It was dated 3 months ago, sent from Karen directly to the CFO. The subject line read simply, "Budget Reduction Strategy Q4." The body text was even worse: Turner's termination saves $58,000 annually. Do it quietly before November. He trusts us. I called HR's pension office first thing the next morning. After being transferred 3 times and left on hold for 20 minutes, I finally reached someone who could access my account information. "I'm sorry, Mr. Turner," the representative said very carefully, clearly reading from a script, "but your file has been temporarily frozen pending a misconduct review. Your benefits are currently inaccessible until the investigation concludes." The floor dropped out from under me. That money wasn't just savings, it was my security, my future, everything I'd worked for. I hung up and immediately called my son, who worked as a corporate lawyer 2 states away in Chicago. I explained everything in a rushed, panicked voice. He listened without interrupting once. When I finished, there was a long, heavy pause. "Dad," he said slowly, "whatever's on that drive, don't go to war yet. Be strategic. Let me make some calls first to people I know." But I already knew exactly what I had to do. The plan was forming in my mind. 3 days later, an email appeared in my inbox from an address I didn't recognize at first. It was from the office manager, not Karen. The message was short and awkwardly worded. Despite the circumstances, they were still holding my retirement party because invitations had already been sent to clients and the venue was booked and paid for. Attendance was optional. The words felt like a vicious slap across my face. They fired me, froze my pension, humiliated me in front of everyone I knew and respected, and now they expected me to show up and smile for appearances and corporate image. The irony was suffocating. But as I read the email again and again, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just an invitation. It was an opportunity, maybe my only one. I opened a reply window and typed 3 short sentences, my fingers steady now. Thank you for the invitation. I'll be there tomorrow. With a box. I met Eddie at a coffee shop far from the office, nearly 30 minutes away in a different neighborhood. He brought his own files, records he had quietly copied over the past few months when nobody was paying attention. Together, we spread everything across the small corner table and pieced together the full, horrifying picture. Karen hadn't just been targeting me specifically. She had been running a sophisticated, long-term embezzlement scheme through fake training programs, phantom consultants with made-up names, and falsified expense reimbursements. The amounts were absolutely staggering, hundreds of thousands over 3 years. Eddie's hands shook as he pointed to one particularly damning spreadsheet with bright yellow highlights. If you present this the right way, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, you can end this without ever raising your voice. Let the evidence speak. I looked at the stack of evidence and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, real, genuine power. Back at the office, Karen played her role perfectly for everyone watching. She oversaw party preparations with exaggerated enthusiasm, ordering expensive decorations and approving the catering budget with a generous smile that never reached her eyes. She even sent out a company-wide memo praising my decades of service, flowery words about dedication, loyalty, and valuable contributions to the company's success. The hypocrisy was absolutely breathtaking. Employees who had watched me get escorted out by security now received glowing emails celebrating my legacy. I heard through Eddie that some people were confused, others deeply uncomfortable, but nobody dared question Karen directly to her face. On the morning of the party, I drove to the office early to drop off my visitor badge, now required since my employee access was revoked. Karen saw me through her office window but didn't acknowledge me at all. She just turned away and continued typing on her computer like I didn't exist. If you're loving the twists in this story, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss our next incredible tale. The night before the party, I couldn't sleep at all. I spent hours in my garage organizing tools. The familiar routine calmed my shaking nerves. Arranging wrenches, sorting screws, the metallic smell of the workspace, it grounded me when everything else felt chaotic. But on the workbench next to my toolbox sat 2 items that didn't belong in any normal garage scene. The flash drive, small and black, loaded with evidence that could ruin careers. A printed packet, labeled in my neat handwriting, for corporate legal, urgent. I stared at them for a long time, thinking about consequences and justice and 35 years of my life. Then I placed both items carefully inside a small, unmarked brown cardboard box and sealed it with tape. 17 ***. The break room buzzed with awkward, uncomfortable energy when I walked in carrying my box. Streamers hung from the ceiling tiles. A banner read, "Happy Retirement," in cheerful letters that seemed to mock the situation. People held plastic cups of punch and made forced small talk in nervous clusters. The moment I stepped through the door, conversations stopped dead. Every head turned toward me. Whispers rippled across the room like a wave. Karen stood near the cake table, wearing a powder blue suit and a practiced smile. She looked at me like I was a curiosity, something unexpected and mildly amusing that had wandered in. "I didn't think you'd actually show up after everything," she said, her voice carrying across the now silent room. I walked forward slowly, clutching my brown box against my chest. "Oh, I wouldn't miss this for the world, Karen. Not for anything." Karen recovered quickly from her surprise, grabbing a microphone from the presentation table. She tapped it twice, and the room fell into heavy, uncomfortable silence. "Everyone, let's take a moment to celebrate our colleague and his many years here," she began, her voice syrupy and completely false. She launched into a clearly rehearsed speech filled with passive-aggressive praise, talking about my traditional methods and old-school approach, with a tone that made both sound like serious weaknesses and liabilities. A few people chuckled nervously. Most just stared at their shoes. When she finished, she held out the microphone toward me with a tight smile, obviously expecting me to deliver some grateful, gracious farewell speech. I looked at the microphone for a long moment. Then I looked directly at her face. I didn't take it. Instead, I reached into my box and pulled out a thick manila folder. The room seemed to hold its collective breath as I opened the folder very slowly and deliberately. Inside were printed emails, photocopies of falsified reports with annotations, and highlighted financial summaries. I set the box down on the table with a soft thump and looked around at all the faces staring back at me, former colleagues, department heads, people I had worked beside for years. My voice was calm and steady when I spoke. "Before I go, there's something everyone needs to know about why I was really fired from this company." I pulled out the first email and held it up so people in the front could clearly see. It was the one where Karen discussed my termination with the CFO, complete with the exact dollar amount saved by cutting me before my pension vested. Karen's smile disappeared completely as I slid the paper across the table toward her, the sound loud in the silence. "You signed this, Karen," I said quietly, pointing to her digital signature at the bottom of the page. Then I began reading excerpts aloud, proof of forged documents, discussions about targeting senior employees, approvals for payments to consultants who didn't exist. With each sentence, the room grew colder. Employees exchanged shocked glances and pulled out their phones. Department heads whispered urgently to each other. Karen's face drained of all color. She stammered something about misunderstandings and needing context, but her voice cracked badly. "You can't prove any of this in court," she finally said, trying desperately to sound authoritative but failing completely. I reached back into my box and held up the flash drive between two fingers. "That's what this is for, Karen. Every email. Every document. Every single fraudulent transaction. All time-stamped and backed up." The room erupted in urgent whispers and gasps. Karen looked around desperately, searching for support that wasn't coming from anyone. What she didn't know, what nobody in that crowded room knew except me, was that I had already sent a full evidence packet to corporate headquarters 2 days earlier. Certified delivery, signed for personally by the legal department director. They had been quietly investigating, waiting for confirmation and additional evidence. I had given them everything they needed to build an airtight case. Right on cue, as if choreographed, the break room doors opened. A man in a gray suit stepped inside, his expression neutral and professional. He held up a badge. "Corporate compliance," he announced calmly to the room. "Ms. Holt, we need you to come with us immediately. Don't make this difficult." Karen's face went from pale to gray to almost green. She opened her mouth, closed it, then looked around the room like someone might defend her or explain this was all a mistake. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The compliance officer gestured firmly toward the door. Karen had no choice but to follow, her expensive heels clicking loudly against the tile floor in the otherwise completely silent room. Every eye watched her leave. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat or celebrate. I simply stood there, breathing steadily, feeling 35 years of dignity slowly return to my shoulders like a weight lifting. People started approaching me, apologizing, asking questions, but I was utterly exhausted. I gathered my things, my folder, my box, my jacket, and thanked everyone quietly for coming today. As I headed toward the door, the compliance officer stepped directly in front of me, blocking my path. "Mr. Turner, don't leave just yet. We need to speak with you as well about what you know." They took me to a private conference room on the executive floor I'd never been to before. The conversation lasted over an hour. Corporate representatives apologized repeatedly for what they called serious misconduct and catastrophic failure of leadership and oversight. They reinstated my benefits immediately, unfroze my pension, and offered back pay for all the days I had been wrongfully terminated. But they wanted more from me. They asked detailed questions about other employees, about systemic issues, about whether I had witnessed age discrimination before this incident. I answered every single question honestly and thoroughly, giving them names and dates. When they finished, they thanked me profusely and stood to leave. I stopped them at the door with a raised hand. "Can I suggest one policy change?" I asked carefully. They looked at me with genuine curiosity. I told them exactly what needed to happen to protect workers like me in the future. 3 months later, I received an unexpected call from corporate HR, the real one, not Karen's corrupt department that had been completely dissolved. They offered me a consulting position, part-time, fully remote from home, with complete pension and benefits and excellent pay. My first assignment was redesigning ethics training and creating safeguards against age discrimination throughout the company. I accepted without hesitation. The work was meaningful, and for the first time in years, I felt genuinely valued and respected. Then one evening, I received an anonymous email from an untraceable address. No subject line, just 2 short sentences: "Karen Holt has been blacklisted from the industry. She'll never work in HR again anywhere." I stared at the screen for a long time, thinking about justice. Then I closed my laptop and smiled to myself in the quiet of my home. Now I sit in my home office, warm sunlight streaming through the window, a cup of coffee steaming beside me on the desk. The same brown box sits on the shelf, but it's filled with something different now: thank you letters from coworkers I helped over the years, cards from employees who found their voices after I found mine, messages from people across the company who said I inspired them to stand up for themselves. I run my fingers over the worn edges of the box and think about everything that happened. They thought they were taking my job, my dignity, my future. They thought I would disappear quietly into the night. But they were wrong. I didn't just take back what was mine, I took back my peace, one file at a time.